Alright, so today I'm going to be covering macroevolution and some different schools of thoughts on how this process is possible. So the first thing I'd like to cover is gradualism, which states that change comes about gradually or that variation is gradual in nature. So for example, we have birds that have adapted to different environments in order to utilize the environment's specific food sources. It's these small changes like the bird beak size over time that will eventually result in the diversity of species that we see today. Small changes in alleles over time give us large changes. That's gradualism. Now, there's some people who believe in the punctuated evolution theory, and that is when a species will adapt to an environment well and will achieve an equilibrium with that environment. It'll stay relatively unchanged for a long period of time until something happens. A cataclysmic event, for example, will force that organism to rapidly adapt or go extinct. If it does go extinct, then it's going to open up some environmental niches for other species to come into and fill. And the species that do that, this process is called adaptive radiation. So less competition all of a sudden results in the large changes in a species morphology. So, large changes in the environment equals large changes, rapid changes in a species. And this is the school of thought called punctuated evolution. So, speciation occurs when the changes to an organism become so great that they're no longer able to mate and produce fertile offspring with the ancestral organism. This can be due to genetic differences and even social differences. One example of this was in a fruit fly experiment that scientists did, in which they separated two populations of fruit flies and fed one source of food and another source of food. And over time, or many generations, eventually these two populations of fruit flies were reintroduced, and the scientists found that they would no longer mate with each other. So this is an example of macroevolution that we have observed directly. Those two populations became different species. They could or would no longer mate with each other and produce viable, fertile offspring. So this is easy to see in fruit flies because they reproduce so rapidly. However, when we're looking at classifying extinct species, this becomes a bit more problematic because we can't actually determine whether they can produce offspring. So what we have to do is we have to infer whether the species whether the two organisms belong to the same species or whether they are actually different species. And we can only do this through things like fossil analysis and DNA analysis. So when we're classifying in this way, when we're classifying these species, there are two schools of thought that people go through, that people belong to. And those schools of thought are called the splitters and the lumpers. So the lumpers believe that speciation happens less frequently, so they assert that the differences in organisms are intraspecific, which means within a species. They tend to lump organisms together more during classifications because of this. Splitters, on the other hand, believe that speciation occurred frequently and that variations were interspecific, so that variation occurred between species. And because of this, they tend to split organisms up into many different species while classifying. So I've kind of gone over the major schools of thought on how macroevolution occurs, how we determine species, the differences in species, in regards to living species as well as extinct species. And if anyone has anything that they want to add that I might have missed, just go ahead and shoot me a message. Let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.